All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. It's really great to see all of you, and I'm glad you're able to join the Oregon Law Business Law program for the Business Law Practitioners panel today. My name is Christy Gibson, and I'm a supervising attorney and instructor in the Business Law Clinic. And I also serve as a faculty supervisor for in-house counsel field placements and an administrator in the Oregon Law Business Law program. I know that many students who are participating today are exploring business law generally, and I know some students are interested in specific areas of business law, such as intellectual property, corporate governance, mergers and acquisitions, tax, estate planning, and in-house counsel work. So our panelists have worked in a number of these practice areas and will be sharing with us their career paths and information pertaining to their respective practices. So we are recording today's session, and we anticipate posting the recording on MyLaw. This is an informal session, so if you have questions during the discussion, you're welcome to raise your virtual hand, or you can put your question in the chat. We'll also reserve time at the end of the session for questions. Today, it's really a pleasure to virtually welcome our outstanding business law panelists, Carrie Hellwig Christopher, Megan Livermore, who will be joining us shortly, and Ian Richardson to our virtual Oregon Law session. I'm also delighted to welcome and introduce my co-host, Mary Savage, who will be introducing our panelists. Mary Savage. Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to share a little bit about you here real quick too. So Mary Savage shared with me that she was recently called a four-time duck. Now, I've heard of a double duck, but admittedly, I had never heard the term four-time duck. So Mary explained that it means she earned her undergraduate, her MBA, and her law degree all from the University of Oregon. And I thought, well, that makes three, but what about the fourth? So she's a four-time duck because she's now teaching at the University of Oregon in both the law school and the business law school. So this past fall, Mary taught the Accounting for Lawyers course at Oregon Law, and she's planning the fall 2022 course. And you're welcome to reach out to Mary if you'd like more information about this course offering. And as you can imagine, business law can be an interdisciplinary practice. Business lawyers and their clients often work with accountants, financial professionals, and insurance professionals for a variety of business and law-related matters. So Mary is, in addition to teaching, she's also active in the local legal community. She's been the past president of both the Eugene Springfield Tax Association and the Eugene Estate Planning Council. And currently Mary is the treasurer for the Lane County Women Lawyers and is part of the Oregon Society of Certified Public Accountants. So welcome, Mary. I look forward to your introduction of our panelists.
Thank you very much, Christy. I really appreciate it. And I love being back at University of Oregon. I think teaching is my passion. So I'm going to introduce Carrie Hellwig Christopher first. I've known Carrie for a number of years. In fact, our offices used to be across the parking lot, and I would sort of wave to her on occasion. Carrie is a UCLA graduate for undergrad and law. She started her career at Cooley LLP, an international law firm, and she was specializing in high-tech and life science technology companies in a wide range of corporate securities and communication matters. Her current areas of practice are acquisitions, sales of businesses and assets, corporate governance and planning, technology transfer and licensing, trademark and copyright, that's one of her big specialties, data privacy rights, publishing, digital commerce. She also, in her spare time, which I don't know how she has any, she serves on the board of Open Door Foundation, Parenting Now, and Junior Achievement. So she's pretty busy. And our next panelist I'm going to introduce, Megan Livermore. She made it. Hi, Megan. Megan is the Chief Executive Officer for the State of Oregon Professional Liability Fund. But prior to starting at the PLF, Megan worked at two Eugene law firms, Gatos, Churnside, Balthrop, and then at Hutchins, most recently at Hutchinson Cox. Her experience includes plenty of entrepreneurial experience, helping to launch a successful tech company, taking it from startup to IPO. Her practice focused on advising clients on strategic planning, business transactions, IP management, commercial and residential real estate transactions, and the sexy one is cannabis. Right? That's very popular now, and there's a lot going on in that market. And last but not least, there's Ian Richardson, who was actually my very first call to see if he would be on the panel because of his wide range of business activities. So Ian works for Gleaves, Swearingen. I always have to pause to make sure I say the last part of that correctly.
We can tell if you've been drinking or not. You say Swearingen.
Ian has helped his business clients meet a variety of challenges, from startup to mergers and acquisitions, often serving in the role of general counsel. He's experienced in corporate governance and finance, mergers, acquisitions, real estate sales and leases, technology licensing and development, and a broad spectrum of other commercial transactions. His current practice focus is on federal tax law, specifically estate planning, intergenerational wealth transfer, protection plans, succession planning. So he's really a trust and estates guy. How much of your practice would you say that is?
Oh, about half at
Half?
this point. Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have some really good help. So yeah, half or a little bit more. The lines blur.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true with all of business practice. You know, you might specialize in, 4 or 5 different areas, but that doesn't mean that's all you do. There's just a plethora of different activities, different businesses. You might do real estate, you might do construction, manufacturing. It's just varies, transportation, insurances, just a wide variety that our panelists have been exposed to. Okay, Christy.
Sure. Thank you, Mary. So let's start by asking our panelists to talk a little bit about your career path and your professional journey. What was your motivation to pursue a business law practice? And let's start with Carrie.
Okay. So I went to law school thinking I was going to do family law. And my second year, I took we had a visiting professor for business organizations, and he had practiced on Wall Street for a while. And he had this real no nonsense approach to business law and securities violations. And his exam was a real world problem that he had to deal with during his time on Wall Street. And we had to just basically figure out how to solve a bunch of issues, kind of like the bar exam question. And there was no right answer. And there was nothing you could do to really study for it other than just know the material from the course. And I thought it was actually really fun. And it was the first time in law school I realized that I felt like there was a practical application for what we were learning. So I ended up doing a summer associate job at Cooley, not really sure what I would think of that. And I ended up doing a lot of work with a group of women that did IT, well, not IT, tech, life science licensing. And they asked me to join their group. And so that's what I did after graduation. And Cooley at the time had a hard stance against representing big pharma, and they worked with small startups, and they took orphan drugs. And I was in San Diego. We did a lot of work with UCSD and the Scripps Research Institute. And so I felt like I was helping cure cancer by working on this stuff as a lawyer. We did a lot of IPOs. And at some point, I had to do that in addition to the licensing work. I just really wanted to focus on technology law. So I moved on to another big law firm with a partner he and I went there together and started a IP practice at that law firm. And I did that for a while, but you have to work a lot at the big law firms. And at some point I wanted to have more of a lifestyle job. So I went in-house. So I've worked at 2 different software companies. The first one was a big company that had lots of different products for the automotive industry. And the second one was a software publisher, super small, owned by a larger public company. Both were really fun. In the first one, I was one of a few in-house attorneys. And at the second, I was the only in-house attorney. And then we moved to Oregon, and I came to Hershner Hunter, and I've been here for 13 years. And Ian had mentioned that one of the things, or maybe Mary did in his bio, one of the things that he's done is sort of act as a general counsel. I do that for a lot of the clients I work with. I work with a lot of ed tech companies and other types of technology companies, publishers, people who grow things, not cannabis, but other things, and distribute products worldwide. Eugene has a surprising number of really interesting companies that aren't very involved with the chamber or otherwise, and so you might not know who they are. But that's how I ended up here. And I do a lot of technology licensing, trademark and copyright. And one of the things that happens when you represent tech companies is, and their startups, is oftentimes they get acquired. So I do a fair amount of M&A, and then I lose them and I'm very sad, but new ones come up too.
Great, thank you, Carrie. So interesting to see how what you've done during the course of your careers, it's built upon each of the prior steps that you had to, and has branched out to just become a really robust business practice for you, especially in the IP area and the tech sector. Megan.
Okay, let me see if I can get my technology to work. Funny that I was in tech, but we just got new computers yesterday, so everything is a little bit off. I apologize. So the question was, how did we get where we are? my story feels much more twisted than Carrie's, but the funny part is, when I went to law school, I had been in tech, as Mary mentioned in my bio, and I went to law school because I wanted to be a CEO. So I finally made my way here. It took me 16 years to get here, but I got here, and it was a sort of a circuitous route. But I'm really glad that I spent my time doing private practice, doing business and real estate work, because I think it was really informative to the work that I'm doing now. And combining that with the entrepreneurial experience, I think was really a nice way to get here. I think one of the things I appreciated about private practice is something I think that Carrie just said, and that is sort of acting as general counsel for businesses. In particular, Oregon has a lot of small businesses. We're getting more bigger businesses, but folks rely on their outside team of experts to help them, and professionals to help them through the process of starting a business, running their business, being acquired, whatever it might be. And it's a really great opportunity to work with really interesting folks and people who have a lot of enthusiasm and energy for the work that they're doing, and provide them with some guidance and be part of their team. And it's always really exciting to see folks grow. And I will say one thing that I always tell people when I'm talking to students who are interested in business law, and something I learned through my entrepreneurial experience before I became a lawyer, and that is that lawyers and entrepreneurs are like oil and water. They don't mix well. Entrepreneurs are they dream big and they want to do big things, and in spite of all the odds, they oftentimes will fly and make things happen. And lawyers tend to be very risk averse, and they want to tell everybody, you can't, it's dangerous, there's risk, you shouldn't. And those two personalities don't work well together. But I think you can make it work well together if you can understand that you come at it from two different points of view, and that your job as a business lawyer is to tell your clients, these are the risks you face. I understand you want to do something big. These are the risks you face. You need to make a business decision about which of these risks you're willing to take. I myself am a very risk-averse person. I now work in the insurance industry, which is also very risk-averse, so I think that suits me well. But but entrepreneurs tend to be less risk-averse, and so you just it's a matter of understanding how to work with them. But I saw that play out many times, and I got that advice actually from a lawyer I worked with that was at the company I was at before I went to law school, and I think it's played out well. So it's my 2 cents.
Great, thank you, Megan. And as you mentioned too, with your background in tech, before going to law school, that also creates a great opportunity for clients because you've had that experience as an entrepreneur yourself, and you have that frame that you can then bring to the discussions that you have with clients about their work and what it looks like from potentially their perspective, and then bringing the business lawyering aspect into it and helping them understand the risks and why some of the things that we are doing as lawyers are important to help them understand the risks that they're taking and making sure that they're making informed decisions as they grow their business. So thank you. Ian, how about you?
Well, so I get, yeah, how did I get to law school or be a lawyer? I think that was the question. Right? So I got out of school and moved to the big city and just got a job. This is back when you got the classifieds out of the back of the newspaper and you sent in blind resumes that you had to print, you know, and so I was in sales out of college for 7 years, 6-7 years, and had a real good run, made good money, lived in San Francisco and all that, and it was great, but kind of came to this point where I started to realize this is a young man's sport, or a young person's sport, sorry. It's just a saying. And I could see that I was going to start bumping into things, bumping into caps on my ability to keep moving up. So I met my wife there. We did kind of took off for a little while, took some time off, and came back to things and didn't know what I was going to do. So I had a couple down weeks, and I took a bunch of tests. I took the one you take for MBA school. I forget what that's called. I took the one you take for general grad school, and I was an English major at Cal, so I got to be good. So I took the one to go like the English prof route, and I took the LSAT. And I didn't think much about the LSAT, but I got absolutely killed on all the other tests. I thought like I knew something about English literature. Oh my God, I was like bottom 30% on that. They had math on that MBA test. So I ended up just killing it on the LSAT. And my mom had been a lawyer at that point for a little while. I knew what some of that was. And so applied to law school and got a scholarship and went and did it. I come from, my family roots are in a smaller community, rural community, and I thought I was going to go back there and be the small town Main Street lawyer. Clerked out in Hood River, which was an incredible opportunity, and learned very quickly the reality of small rural Western America, which is you will be doing divorce, child abuse, and meth. And there ain't much business work. Also, my first year of law school, I took a tax class, and I didn't think about tax law, but I loved it. I had this great professor. He's still practicing, Jack Bogdansky, up in Portland, and I just kind of got into the tax thing. So I ended up taking 22 hours of tax in law school, and that's the basis for me being a business lawyer. Tax doesn't exist on its own. It cannot exist absent a business transaction or absent some kind of financial activity. So if you know something about tax, you know something about the underlying transactions. And in fact, I still use B&A portfolios, which is for lawyers, I think the best tax resource out there. I use that to get my head around business transactions all the time. So tax really just kind of, I don't know, it kind of clicked. It's like if you get into the rules of a board game or something, if you like to use rules to achieve an outcome, maybe you'd like it, putting together little puzzles all the time. But anyway, that's I kind of stumbled into the law as something that seemed to suit my skill set, stumbled into tax, found that suited my skill set, and I went to school at Lewis and Clark and not University of Oregon because I was certain I'd never get a job in Eugene. What's the point? Might as well go to Portland. Well, I got an offer to come down here, and I know a little bit about Eugene, lived here when I was a little kid, and so jumped at the opportunity. It's a great place to raise kids and be an actual person in a real community where you know people know you, and you are held accountable by your personal relationships. So I just wanted to make one comment before I forget. I think you all youngsters there, now that I'm old, you may get kind of a very limited view of what business law is. It's very broad. It's as broad as business. So you might work with big companies, you might work with small companies. The bigger the companies, probably the more narrow your focus will be. The smaller the companies, the more you got to be general counsel and field every question that comes your way. So just because you're a business lawyer doesn't mean you're working for a big business. Just because your client's a corporation doesn't mean they are evil land rapists. So I got a client that's a cookie company. They were in the paper, and they're a corporation, but they're not Nabisco. And so a mom and pop cookie company in Eugene, Oregon is a business client, but you're going to have a very different job working for them than working for Nabisco. Anyway, I can go on and on. By the way, I did do in-house counsel, Carrie. It's funny. I went in-house for a little bit. It just about killed me and got me divorced. I'm lucky to have survived it. It was the worst experience I've ever had. These people owned my butt. It was like being a manager in a, it was like being mid-level management, snap your finger, you're doing this, you're going there. Oh, it's terrible. So those could be good experiences, but being an employee is tough because then you only got one client and they own you, Anyway, thanks. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ian, and thank you for sharing too how you became interested in tax. I think for a lot of our students that are just exploring at this point in time and may not necessarily know exactly what area of business or areas of business that they might like to pursue in practice, and sometimes taking the class or having an experience, maybe working as in-house counsel in the student role, or taking a class that's a skills-based class can just spark some interest and may lead that student then on a pathway to pursuing that as a potential career. So as that is for a segue, I'd just like to open it up to all of our panelists and ask about law school courses or experiences that students might want to pursue while they're in law school if they're thinking about a business law path, whether that be in a private firm or in-house. What are some of your suggestions about things that students might consider as they're planning their schedule for next year or thinking about ways that they can explore opportunities in business law?
Well, I'll jump in because when I saw that on your list of things to talk about, and hopefully this will make Carrie happy. Take an IP class, at least one, if not many. You will be surprised at how often that comes across your desk, whether it's something you want to deal with or not, whether you want to do trademark and copyright work, if you have the background, you want to be a patent attorney. You should have a basic understanding of those issues because they can be very important to businesses, big and small. And you need to be able to advise your clients that's a piece of their business that can have a significant amount of value, particularly as they build their business and their brand. And so you don't want that to fall off your radar screen.
I'm a big proponent of taking courses that teach you about being a lawyer. So if they're like the business clinic and anything else that's offered where you get to take a stab at drafting documents or learning if there's practitioners that come in and teach courses, learning because they often tell war stories. And sometimes the most valuable thing you get out of that semester's class is their war stories because it familiarizes you with practice. And business courses. I took personal income tax and was like, oh, this is so not for me. So I never, ever went further with tax. As Ian was saying, there's a wide array of things to do with business. And I think Ian and I approach it from opposite sides. So I'm all about, well, I solve puzzles too, but the rules are sort of there to guide it, but mostly what I'm doing is I'm doing something creative, and the rules are sort of their boundaries, but they sort of just do this with most of the things that come up in my practice, except M&A.
Hi, we have a question from a student, and I think it's a really good question. It's about the current topic. What if you're a 3L, all right, and they're graduating here in May, and what can they do to, enhance their knowledge of business law at this point?
That might be
Everybody's quiet.
For you guys. What can you do? You're going to graduate in, you're in your last term.
Well, okay, I'm gonna say you can focus because once you graduate and you get a job, there's also continuing education. So you can always do continuing education to focus that in an area you might be interested in. I mean, Ian, I don't remember. I do mostly CPE for my CPA license. I don't do it for the law license much anymore. So is it 80 hours every 3 years?
It is every 3 years, but I can't remember how many hours. It's a lot.
Yeah. So, you know, if you express an interest in it, whatever firm you end up going at, I mean, having an interest in business law will make you that much more attractive. I can guarantee you if you're interested in pension plans or retirement plans, a lot of the big firms will just pick you up. No questions asked, whether you know anything or not, because there's a real deficiency in that area.
So we seem to have swung rapidly from there being too many lawyers to not enough. It's just all of a sudden it's hard to hire lawyers for us, and that may be just a local thing, but I hear it more and more from a lot of people. And so there's always a value, I think, in being proactive and outgoing, but that may be more rewarding than normal now. I mean, you might actually start pushing on trying to get a job like right now. Maybe you start hitting people up and, hey, you know, I don't know whether that would work or not. And Carrie, I'd be really curious to hear what your folks' experience is, but we have had, it seems harder in the last couple of years to get good lawyers in your firm.
I think we're experiencing it too. I think it may be more challenging in Eugene. Ironically, it used to be the select few could stay, and now it seems most people want to leave. And so the pendulum has shifted on that. But the number of ads that I see and pushes from the California bar for firms looking for people, and the number of active headhunters looking to recruit for people to move firms at a fairly low level suggests to me that there for some reason there's just not a lot of 3-4 year lawyers out there who are looking for something new.
Do you think part of that has to do with COVID and people are just kind of hunkered down, don't want to make a move?
I don't know.
Yeah. That might have been some of it. I think that's gone now, or is going away very rapidly now, because Portland firms are poaching our associates.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And it used to be the other way. You would poach their associates because they wanted a calmer life.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the pendulum that has shifted.
Yeah, the opportunities in Eugene might be diminished compared to, they certainly are diminished compared to 20 years ago. And that, it's a hard town to be, especially it's a hard town to be single in your 20s. I certainly understand people going to the big city.
Do you think that there's some advantage to going to work for a bigger firm in a bigger city for a few years and then moving to where you want to be down the road? Would you hire more people, more students, or are you looking for people with 3 years of experience?
Well, yeah, I'm sure. I'm looking for a 3 to 5 year associate with big firm experience, top 10% of the class. No problem, right?
Good luck with that. Yeah.
Good luck with that. You're not gonna find any. So you got to develop your own talent and hope they don't get stolen. It's kind of, but so I didn't have any. I came to work here, went in house with a client for 2 years, and then came back. Carrie, you were at a big firm. You know, you might have that. Like you were at Cooley's. Like that was Cooley Godward. Is that right?
When I was there, it was Cooley Godward.
Yeah.
Now it's Cooley.
Big time.
Yeah. No, so I have a book that I still have of the photos of everybody that started in my class. And I think there's like 250 of us that started at the same time across all the offices.
Oh my
Oh my
God.
gosh.
Maybe it was 150, but my incoming class just at the San Diego office, which was, we had a San Francisco office. The Palo Alto office was like 2 or 3 times the size of the other offices. Our office was in San Francisco, I think we're comparable, but my incoming class was 18 new baby lawyers in one office in one city.
Wow.
And that was actually, so I graduated in 2001. So when I went to go start work, that was, you know, the one of the crashes. And so most of the first and second years that I had become friends with during my summer had been laid off to make room for us. And then the year after that, half my class was laid off. I remember I knew they were doing it, and I went in the break room and was just kind of standing in there like, it's going to save me. And someone came in and said, it's okay, you can go back to your office, you're not on the list. So I went back to my office. But then the next year, it's just, that's what happens. And it's a different model. So that model is, they're going to work you really, really hard, and they're going to try to break you, and they're going to see who can survive. And so, you know, people drop off at all different points for different reasons, but it's a pyramid. And very few people, I would say very few people even want to make partner at a big law firm by the end, because my friends that are still doing that literally have no lives, and most of them are pretty miserable if they're being honest, but they make a lot of money. And their families take really good vacations that they work during.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and I have a friend that moved to London, you know, and they're going to move back because he was supposed to go to London, open the new office and have a life in London. And what is he doing? He's working 24/7 and actually having to fly to New York all the time again. So it's just a very different model with respect to, so you learn a lot when you go somewhere like that because they work you so hard. I mean, we were working 2,100 hours, billable hours every year. And that was low. Like if you worked 2,700 was where some people were, and that was the preferred, which I don't even know how they did that. I don't think they slept. I was working 2,100 and feeling like that was way more than enough and too much sleeping on the floor for my taste. But I learned a lot, and it opened a lot of doors. And I also paid off my student loans. And I think because law school is so expensive now, that is one of the challenges for firms like us in Eugene recruiting, you know, brand new associates. You have your student loan debt, and it can sometimes be a challenge to pay that off if you're working in a smaller town, because our, you know, the really big Portland firms pay more because they're national, and it's just a little bit different. We've had success hiring laterals, and we've had success growing up attorneys that came from the U of O and Willamette and other local schools. I wouldn't say one works better than the other. But we're very much interested in recruiting new attorneys and training them to be Hershner Hunter attorneys and to grow up in our firm and stay.
How
It's
many
just
attorneys?
really hard to.
How many are you hiring a year?
Well, so I think Ian indicated too. We are struggling to to find laterals in particular, but
Right.
we've hired a few new people, and we have people coming for the summer, but it's usually never more than 2 in one class, because we're a 20 lawyer-ish firm,
Right.
give or take. And so there's only so much room every year because we do not have this model. Our goal is to have every single person who comes to our firm make partner.
Yeah, our firms are very similar that way, and that is what our I mean, hey, you would look better. Your resume looks better if you worked at Cooley. That means you know what a thorough quality product looks like. It is sometimes striking what what a second year associate who worked in kind of a small general whatever practice firm will deliver as. I mean, you're trained, they train you. And if it is a stamp of approval, it's a good thing. 2,100 hours though is just freaking brutal. 40 hours a week, 50 hours a year is only 2,000. Brutal. I don't know how you do it.
Yes. I'm not kidding about the sleeping on the floor.
Yeah,
it's not a joke.
I've heard this. Cots. I mean, I had friends who went into these. In fact, we got one of our guys here, Mike Faulkner, was down in L.A. Oh, you were in San Diego. He was down in L.A. Latham Watkins, and the same thing. He said we had cots. Smart people had a cot in the office to take a power nap. Yeah, and it's drudgery too, right? It's not like you're like being tantalized with like interesting scenarios. No, it's like plow through these 20 banker boxes. Oh.
Yes, and there's a lot of hazing. I mean, and you get past that pretty quick, but my first weekend, so my first week of work, I got staffed on an M&A deal, and they had to do there was a conference on the Monday, so it had to be finished because they needed to do the press release. And literally, we were all camped at what is now DLA's office in San Diego, and there were nap rooms, but nobody had time to take the nap. And we, for 3 days, there were a bunch of us just there doing. And I mean, I didn't know much about anything as a brand new associate, but I was pulling things from Edgar and proofing the merger agreement and getting coffee and doing other things, literally for 72 hours with no sleep.
My goodness.
Which was it was a rude awakening that was one of the longest hauls without getting to go home. But yeah,
I will say from a slightly different perspective, if there's a nap room at the firm that you're interviewing with, you should run for the hills. That is that is very telling. But I will say, back to the original question, if I might just give a slightly different perspective. I don't want anyone to think that if you didn't take particular classes in law school or don't have particular experience, that it doesn't mean that you can't pivot and become a business attorney because that's what you want to do. If you've taken the basic bar classes, if you've taken contracts, secured transactions, these sorts of things, you have the kind of foundation you need. What you need to learn to do is be a lawyer. You need to learn to work with your clients. And I had a fantastic experience. I mean, I, of course, had some business experience before I went to law school, but I actually worked with 2 fantastic attorneys who now work with Carrie at Hershner Hunter, Don Churnside and Jerry Gatos. Christy, I know you worked with them as well. And, if you can find an opportunity with a smaller firm that does some business work, and you can work with people that are good lawyers. And what I mean by good lawyers is people who are practical and approach problems from a practical perspective, who aren't aggressive for the sake of just being aggressive, and who want to help their clients and want to teach you how to be a good lawyer. That's gonna serve you so well. Being a business lawyer, or frankly, any other kind of lawyer. So don't feel like if you didn't take all the classes and you're graduating in May, that it means you're dead in the water, because it doesn't. Just, being a lawyer, having that basic foundation. And in fact, I didn't talk about this in the introduction when asked about why I went to law school, but I went to law school because I had sort of, in spite of my experience with my the company I helped launch, I had kind of run into, I won't call it a glass ceiling necessarily, but a brick wall in my career. And the CEO of the company was a patent attorney. And I sort of out of the blue said, oh, maybe I should go to law school and talk to him about it. And he said, whatever it is you choose to do with your career, Megan, you will never regret getting a JD. It will open a lot of doors for you. It will teach you a lot of things you need to know to function in the world and to be a professional and to go into business or whatever it is you want to do. So take that to heart. It is true, and you will build the experience you want to build if you go seek it out. But you're going to have a good foundation with your law degree. So feel good about that.
Exactly. And it sounds like that there are some opportunities that are starting to open up too. So maybe if our panelists can share a little bit about what are some of the tips that you can share about networking or making connections in the legal profession. Sometimes if we're not sure which direction we might want to go initially, reaching out and talking to practitioners who are working in those areas where we may be exploring or wanting to know more about that particular line of practice. What does it look like? What is the market for that kind of practice? What are some of the things that you think students might be able to do to learn more about the legal profession and any of the areas in which they're considering practice?
Do you mean specifically like here at the end of before you graduate this year, or as a lawyer, or do you mean as a student or as a lawyer, I guess?
Actually, both, as a student and then after graduation, taking the bar, and then how do you connect with the legal community? How do you get involved? How do you learn about opportunities? It seems like sometimes not all of the positions are going to be posted, although we do have a lot of postings with our Center for Career Planning and Professional Development, but sometimes positions grow organically. And sometimes the students will reach out and or graduates will reach out, and there may be an opportunity that a firm may not have had open and posted, but there might be a match for a student who may have a particular skill set, or there might be a really good connection with the firm and the student, either as building a good relationship with that attorney, or there might be a job opportunity either now or in the future.
We used to call them informational interviews. I don't know if you still call them that, but waiting for it to come to you is going to be a slow road. So get on, be actual networking opportunities for students. I understand a lot of what lawyers would do. So it's kind of, it doesn't help to say get a job. Networking to help get a job. There are some professional organizations. I assume we have opportunities for students to come to, like, Tax Association, the State Planning Council. There maybe New Lawyers has a student thing. The Tax Bar has a group that meets down here every so often for students that are interested in the tax section of the bar, for students who are interested in tax. Heard of that? I don't know. But boy, I'm feeling awful old all of a sudden.
Lane County Women Lawyers, we used, prior to COVID, we would do quite a few, at least two events with students each year. And I think that helps get people involved. And we used to do an event that also involved CPAs with Emerald Empire that invited students to join. But I think any organization, once you're working for a firm, helps, whether it's tax association or just being involved.
I agree, Mary. I think getting involved and being involved is probably the most important thing that you can do, because relationship building is everything. And it's, I know it's different now than it used to be. It makes me feel very old to think about how, in-person stuff used to be. And it's not just the pandemic, right? It's social media and the way that we connect now. It's different than we used to. But if you are interested in a particular area of law, join that bar section. And I realize as students, you may be a little limited in that, but you can join Oregon Women Lawyers. You can join an affinity bar group if there's one that speaks to you. And they will have events. Go to events, volunteer to be of service to the Bar Association, join the sections, be on their executive committees, go to the events, get to know people. It really is that sort of simple and not simple. It takes a lot of time, but many of the connections I made that got me to where I am today were from volunteering to be on the Lane County Bar Association board, being on the Oregon Women Lawyers Board and being a member of OWLS, being members of other affinity groups, being on bar sections and being on those executive committees for those bar sections, because then I got to know lawyers outside of Eugene and across the state. And it meant a lot at the end of the day when it came to making the connections to changing firms in Eugene, to moving on to this new career path that I'm on. And so I think you can't stress enough that networking, whether it be virtually or in person, and sort of being a joiner and being of service to the profession are kind of a big deal. I mean, if you go work at a big firm, that might write your ticket. But if that's not your path, and it's not the path for most people, then you got to do the legwork, and people need to know you. And that's how you get jobs.
One of the ways I met Carrie, and this was a number of years ago, is I started a women's luncheon group. And I would do, and I started this with the firm I worked for, Cornet Stokes, and I invited 2 or 3 women to come with me. And then I reached out to Hershner Hunter and said, okay, I invited Amanda and said, invite 2 other people to come with us. And we just started alternating that. Wasn't anything official organization or anything. It's just something I thought we needed to do. And I met a lot of people doing that.
Great. And I think the Oregon State Bar New Lawyers Division is quite active as well. And I think that oftentimes they have events where students can also participate. And then if I remember correctly, the Oregon State Bar has a law student associate program too. So it's free for students. So you might take a look there because you may be able to get on some of the listservs and see what practitioners are talking about. It's a good way to learn about emerging areas of the law and business law. And that will also give you talking points too, as you're doing your outreach and doing informational interviews, knowing a little bit about what the community is talking about in terms of say, hot topics or issues that clients may be facing going forward. So we do have a question in the chat from a law student. The student asks, when law students apply to your firms and they indicate an interest in corporate and M&A practices, what are the most common reasons that students either don't get an interview or aren't selected for the position?
Grades. I mean, you want to talk about the first thing anybody's going to look at on your resume? I don't know, lack of you wouldn't see all the courses though on an inquiry like that, right? You'd see the basic resume. So what do we got to go on when you send us a resume? Anything weird is not going to be good unless it's very unusual and positive. Your grades are what they are. If you had work history, if you did something before law school, that's awfully interesting. I don't know. I live in an analog world, really. I love doing business law in Eugene because I deal with people all the time. I deal with them face to face. I've never worked from home. I like dealing with people, so I'm prejudiced. I'd say get in their face and find a way to present yourself, because once somebody realizes, oh, this is a nice person, they seem pretty intelligent, they seem gung-ho, I'd be much more interested in talking to you than just a resume. I don't know. It's probably not.
I've done a lot of interviewing, for hiring and recruiting. And I think the biggest differentiation for applicants is being able to carry on a conversation and being able to have, connect with who it is you're talking to and not just have 1-syllable answers, because the whole practice of law is about communication with people and being able to make that connection. So mock interviews are a great way to practice and get over that initial hump and be fearful. And the other thing is you don't want to not be yourself, because you want to present yourself who you are. Doesn't mean you don't look professional and dress for the position you want. It means don't just tell them what you think they want to hear, because they're going to find out who the real you is soon enough. But be honest and, find something to connect with them, whether it be dogs, gardening, I don't know everything you do in your personal life, but there's something that you could connect with. You've got a painting on the wall. Some sort of conversation starter.
I got one where the guy put down at the bottom, I just got this like 2 weeks ago. His interests outside the office included the usual, outdoor activities and attending jam band concerts. I was like, well, that's out of the box, but I'm not really sure it's good. I don't know, but
Well, it was a conversation starter.
Dude. Yeah.
So one of the things I look for is, oftentimes when you send a resume somewhere, you also send a cover letter. And I tend to be more interested in cover letters that don't just sound like they're telling me what I want to hear. They have something interesting in them, or I don't know, that the person who wrote it is able to convey something personal or real and genuine. And I will tell you that if I find any mistakes in it, I don't look at it again. Any mistakes.
Yeah, no shit. Seriously, like no typos, okay? Print the document, read it. Do not
Have other people
send-
read it and proof it.
Yes, no typos.
Great. So we have another question too about market trends in business law and emerging practice opportunities. What are some of the things that you're starting to see your clients bringing to you? Maybe it's something to do with cryptocurrency or NFTs or other IP matters or business matters that you're now seeing that seem to be, I don't want to say a trend, because of course they're all business related, and a lot of businesses are working through a lot of similar issues. But what are some of the things you're now seeing in practice that you may not have seen about 5 or 6 years ago?
Carrie, you're the tech lawyer.
Yeah, I have stayed away from cryptocurrency, and I have no interest in NFTs. But I would say that one of the things that's becoming more and more challenging for small businesses that are in the tech area is data privacy compliance, because so many companies are collecting data from other countries, and Europe has made it extremely difficult for American businesses to do business with European companies and have data transferred to the US. And so that tends to be a stumbling block for a lot of companies as they start growing, because they're either just not in compliance, or they're having to spend too much money to get compliant. And there's the legal side, the legal documents, but there's a lot that they have to do on the infrastructure side to properly manage that. And when you're small, it flies under the radar for the most part. But as you get bigger, your potential liability exposure is huge. And so you see larger tech companies having data privacy officers, not just because they have to under GDPR, but because there's genuinely so much work to do to try to sort that out for whatever their customer base is.
Well, and since I've been out of private practice, it's been a short time, but I was doing cannabis law before. So, I mean, I guess that's emerging, but I don't know if it's any more, that there's any more business work to do than what was already there. The industry is pretty much sort of self-contained, and Oregon is now looking at capping licensing and stuff. So, but I think there are still opportunities there. And so this is a little off topic, but as your potential malpractice coverage carrier, if you work in Oregon in private practice, I will tell you one thing that as a business lawyer, especially in Oregon, you should be very careful about. And the cryptocurrency thing made me think about this. It is very easy to do what is under Oregon law is considered securities work and to screw it up royally, because you don't do securities work and all you're doing is helping companies form their LLC or their corporation, and they've got some passive investors and you don't think much about it. Just, someone's giving them money to start their company. This happens a lot in the cannabis industry, right? You have someone who knows or says they know what they're doing, growing and selling cannabis. You have people from out of state with a lot of money who don't know anything about it, but see that there's a potential maybe for some money. And Oregon's securities laws are, they're pretty broad. It's very easy to practice securities work without knowing you're doing it. And in Oregon, the lawyer is on the hook if someone gets screwed in a deal and there's a security, and there's any sort of securities hook there. You are on the hook for that. So if you want to do securities work, do that and take a deep dive into it and become an expert on it. If you're going to do just general business work in Oregon, understand the nuances of what you're doing so that you don't inadvertently practice securities law and end up getting sued for several $1 million that you didn't expect.
So if you're going to take a class in business school besides IP, you should take securities law, even if you're not going to practice it, because you should really, really understand that most things where you have multiple people forming a business, especially if they're not all working the same in the business, might be a security, and real estate deals can have securities law implications. All sorts of things can. Our firm actually has a dedicated securities lawyer on staff, and she does a lot of work cleaning up things where there have been issues. And we also sometimes send clients away because they don't understand the personal implications for her and for the firm. And we just aren't able to work with them because it's such a serious issue.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing it up, Megan.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in my face every day in the work that I do. And the securities lawsuits tend to involve people who have a lot of money and are willing to sue to get what they think they are owed. And they tend to be very, very expensive lawsuits. Like the claims for damages, can be tens of millions of dollars, even in Oregon, where, we think those sort of numbers don't play out much. So it's something to just be aware of, but don't let it scare you off. But I agree, Carrie, taking a securities class if you can is a great idea, just to familiarize yourself of the, where the pitfalls are going to be. And Oregon is very generous to investors and not so generous to lawyers who involve themselves in these transactions. So just something to be aware of.
Oh, great. Thank you both for bringing that up too, because there's a potential for personal liability to the lawyer for doing that kind of work. And that's one of the things that we talk about in the business law clinic as our students are working to form limited liability companies and S corporations. We have that conversation too, and we do bring in a practitioner to talk a little bit about securities law, because that can be something that a business attorney, if you don't know that there might be an issue here, may go ahead and form the entity and do the work, but then discover that they have liability later on. So thank you both for bringing that up. There's one more question in the chat, and I think we have time for this last question. The student asks, what type of drafting work do you expect a summer associate to be able to do? And what type of documents do you have them draft or amend?
Well, I'll take a quick stab. I guess my experience is it really depends on the clerk, and you give somebody a first chance, and if you like what they did, well, you're going to give them more and more and more. And if you find that the clerk is really not very good at drafting, and you've got to, I guess you're going to approach it differently. That's not a very good answer, but if you speak English and write English, you should be able to draft legal documents. Brevity and clear and concise drafting is nice, but it's expensive. The main thing is the clear part.
Do your firms have sort of templates for a lot of documents?
Oh, yeah.
So they're not starting from scratch.
No, I mean, typically you try to find projects, a simple business formation, or someone will work on, like if you have an M&A type transaction going on, you might ask them to take a read through the purchase agreement, not expecting them to do much with it other than try to understand it, and then work on ancillary documents or disclosure schedules and diligence, which allows them to read a bunch of contracts in a data room and try to, you give them a list of things that they're supposed to be looking for, like assignment provisions and things like that. And you pick up a lot about kind of just general contracts by reading that, and you can ask the partner questions. Or we'll have them do first drafts of a basic lease, wills, basic estate planning documents. There's a lot of research projects for summer associates, and they're, typically to not litigation research, but for a particular business issue, and we don't know the answer, we want to see if the law has changed. And then you write your memo.
Well, thank you so much. I can't believe it's already 1 o'clock now. I'd like to thank our panelists for all of the information and insight that you've shared with us today. I really appreciate your time and for sharing not only your career path, but for the tips and the talking points that students might want to consider as they're making connections in the legal profession in Oregon. So thank you so much. And to our students who are still in the Zoom meeting, We will be having a business law course information session at the law school prior to the opening of registration. The session will be on April 12th at noon and on Zoom. So there's more information for you on MyLaw. I hope everyone has a good day.